Hi everyone, it's Jeff again. So today I'm going to talk about buying flats versus landed houses. Now, I believe that this concept applies not just to the UK. It applies to Singapore, it applies to the US, Malaysia, whatever country you're from, Spain. A couple of months ago, I sent out an email to our distribution list. So if you want to be included, just drop us an email, which is right below the YouTube channel. To talk about this, which one appreciates faster? And it's a question of demand and supply, of course. Now, I'm going to talk about basic economics 101, right? This in A levels, maybe that's senior high school. This is called the price. I will call it PX. This is called quantity. That is the quantity sold and price of the goods. Now let's pretend that this is a house. And this is a demand, the demand curve. I shall put this D1. Why is it sloping down? The higher the price, the less the demand, isn't it? Now if the house is $100,000, it is so cheap, the quantity bought is that many. But if the house is $10 million, the demand will have been very low, right? And the price is very high. So when demand, and this is a supply, okay? Supply is this way, and I'll put it S1. Okay, it works the opposite way. Now, if you are a seller of houses, if the house would be $100,000, would you sell? No. But if the price of the house were to be $10 million, hey, everybody will want to sell because it's selling very expensively. Now, this is the fundamental of price formation, okay? And it's simply like that. Now, if you were to buy a condo, an apartment, yes, I know that a lot of beautiful condos out there are, very, very expensive, very modern, full glass windows, and then they'll probably sell you that the amenities that is near HSR, train stations, bars, top class restaurants, schools, childcare around the area, shopping. Great. So the demand would have gone up. Simply telling you that the area will be regenerated. That's the word, right? Now, the supply would be this. Now, in normal circumstance, the price will have gone up and the quantity have sold will have gone up as well. Okay. However, in huge projects, don't you think there's government planning where the local council or the local government will say, okay, this is the condo, you're going to build a subway station there, there's going to be tons of amenities, and I'm going to approve only one project. No, right? It's going to approve plenty of projects, high density living. It cannot be that the government invests so much on infrastructure, amenities, and then allow only one project. Therefore, even so, the price goes up. Now, all the projects will start coming out in a couple of years' time. And guess what? There's so many. So finally, the quantity will have gone up from Q1 to Q2 to Q3, and the price gone up from P1 to P2, and then it drops back to P3. So is there any appreciation? This is economics 101. So it is all about demand supply. Now, if you were to buy a house, well, in some countries, houses are very protected. You cannot change the facade. It looks a couple of 100 years old, especially in the United Kingdom and Singapore as well. Land is scarce. The demand may not increase that much. Hey, landed properties are usually built on land that is pretty far away, and the government will not be putting too much investment to such a low density area where there are very few people living, right? It's not high rises. So you might have to drive out to get a carton of milk or somewhere is pretty far away from the train station. So the demand increases very slowly. But is there any supply at all coming out? Not at all. So the price still goes up. The price goes up. Simply because even if the demand increases very little, but because the supply can't move, it goes up in price over the long term. And it keeps going up and up and up simply because there's no supply. Now, in fact, houses are being split. A big house, say 10,000 square feet, is split into two, which is 5,000 square feet of land, and then 5,000 square feet is split into 2,005, and big houses are getting smaller and smaller, so the supply is actually shrinking. Some houses are being bought up and built into condos. So the land allocated as a percentage of housing stock, like in Singapore, has dropped from 4% to 2%, and now is going to 1%. In the UK, roughly 40% or 60% of housing stock is landed. It's going to drop to 40, it's going to drop to 30 all over the world, simply because there isn't any land left. The houses will get smaller. The only way to increase supply is to subdivide it, unless you reclaim land, right? So in fact, in some cases, the supply is shrinking. And if the supply is shrinking, what will happen? The price goes up one more time. So S1 to S2, the quantity sold shrinks to Q3, and the price jumps to P3. So that's the basic of demand and supply. So let's look at whether my demand and supply theory works. This is median property selling prices in London, and over here we take a look at detached, semi-detached, terrace, flat. And over a long track record of about from 1995 all the way to close to 30 years, there's 30 years, it has detached houses increased from £195,000 to 1.15 million. That's almost 5 times, 490%. Semi-detached from £95,000 to 730,000. That is 668%, and terraces increase the fastest from £77,000 to £690,000, and it rose by almost 8 times. And flats 592%. So you can see that terraces rose by the fastest, followed by semi-detached, and then third by flats, and then detached houses, which I think this is an anomaly. We shall look at other cities. On an annual increase, flats in London rose by 6.78% per year, terraces 7.7, semi-detached 7.2, detached 6.2. So how does that compare to Singapore, which is roughly an HDB, Housing Development Board, government flats growing by 6 to 8%, which is very comparable for HDB. For condos are between 3 to 4%, which is better. Now, Singapore landed is between 4 to 8%. Where lies the truth? Now, we have seen close to 10% increase, but how Singapore measures landed price is per square foot of land. And there is the difference in comparison, because if you buy a landed back in 1995 for 1.5 million, say, in 2015, because the property valuation has appreciated, you tear down and rebuild and spend another $3 million to rebuild it. Now your total cost would now be 4.5 million, right? And then the valuation today in 2025 is 6 million. Now how they would calculate, URA will calculate, is that the land remains the same. Let's say it's 5,000 square feet of land. Now, in 1995, it's only $300 per square foot. In 2025, it's 1,200 PSF. Now, this looks as if, wow, it's gone up so much. Okay, 1.5 over 30 years is gone up by 4 times. Okay, however, you paid 1.5 million, you spent 3 million, total gross development cost is 4.5 million. And your real profit is only 1.5 million, because the market value is 6. So if you 6 minus 4.5 is actually equals to 1.5 million. So actually, your land has doubled. Not gone up from 1.5 to 3 to 4.5. It's not gone up by 3 times. It's gone up by only one time. It's double. So the per square foot calculation is bit. Now Singapore is very different. Whereas in many countries, you cannot really tear down and rebuild. So this is what it is. So what is actual landed appreciation in Singapore? I dare say is between 4 to 8%. Okay, so UK is pretty good. What about Birmingham, secondary cities? And here, detached houses started at 94,500 back in 1995 January. In July 24, it is 392,000. It's gone up 315%. Semi-detached gone from 50,000 to 261,000 pounds. It is gone up 422%. Terrace is 414% from 37,000 pounds to 190,000 pounds. Flat from 38,000 to 148,500 pounds, 291%. This looks more normal. So first is semi-detached, followed by terrace, and then detached, and lastly flat. Very interestingly, why is detached appreciating slower than terraces or semi-detached? This is a question that we have to further study. I have one theory. Flats, apartments, this is a city center, yeah? And apartments are usually near the city center. And terraces are a bit further away. Semi-detached are further away because of lack of land. Detached sometimes takes into account rural areas, suburbs, they are far, far away. It's hard to find detached houses in the middle or near the city. So my theory is that they could be very far away. And that's why if you choose a detached appreciation versus a semi-detached in the same zone, then you will see that detached is a winner. Now let's move on to the next part. So how has Birmingham's capital appreciation been? Not bad. 5 terraces, 5.7%, semi-detached 5.76% per year, detached 4.94%, flat 4.73%. And the other thing is, if you look at the London, in the last couple of years, the blue colored zone, after Brexit, there has been a lot of new build, and it has flattened the price because remember demand and supply. But for terrace, semi-detached and detached, it remains resilient there despite the Brexit because there's no supply at all. Similarly, flats in Birmingham is dependent on a lot of new builds. Once they're out, it's very hard to sell because there's one project after another. But for terraces, they have held steady despite the high interest rates, and semi-detached and detached has gone up. I shall even add further, let's say if you buy a 20% premium for new builds, the appreciation for flats will have fallen to 4% because if I increase the starting point of flats by 20%, 45,600 to 148,500, the appreciation will have dropped to 4%, which is comparable to Singapore. Now next, Manchester. Number 1, terrace from 31,000 to 229,000, 639%. Number 2, semi-detached from 48,000 to 288,000, 459%. Third is detached houses, 70,000 to 370,000 pounds, 429%. Fourth is flats, 331%. Again, same thing, very resilient. It has not fallen for houses, whereas flats have fallen. The annual appreciation, terrace, 7% per year. Semi-detached, 6%. Detached, 5.8%. Flats, 5.1%. If I add a 20% premium, assuming all new builds are 20%, is starting point of 51,600 leads to 185,500 is 4.4% appreciation. So why do property gurus keep touting apartments? It's a bit controversial, but commissions are large. It's huge. And the commission is 5 to 10%. Now, I'm not saying that all new builds are terrible. There's a role for new builds. I find that when I was in the UK recently, we would like to stay in new build because generally the insulation is better. Unlike houses that are 100 years old, it can be very cold during winter. Secondly, new builds are very near city centers, so when it's new build, there's a lot of amenities. So there's a role for new builds. They're good for Airbnb service accommodation. When you cater to tourism, they tend to like to live near the city center, and therefore new builds are suitable for Airbnb, so you can put it on booking.com. But in terms of capital appreciation, it will not be there. Airbnb rentals can be up to 20 to 50% higher. So even if you pay a premium of 20%, it could still make sense for the cash flow. Next, analyze the property as if you're analyzing stocks. And in stocks, we learn PE ratio, or PE, more importantly, PE to growth, price earnings to growth ratio. How to do that on property? You look at growth in terms of GDP growth. Price is the average house price, divide by earnings will be their salary, average salary, divide by the last 7 years or the last 5 years of economic growth. And you can see that in Singapore, our GDP growth in nominal terms, that means including inflation, okay, we want to know the pure numbers, is actually 3.2%. In the US, is 2.4%. In the UK, 3.5%. The average house price, 1.2 million. In Singapore, in the US, 420,000. And in the UK, 350,000. The average salary in Singapore is 46,200. And the US, 65,000. In the UK, $54,000. So what is the PEG ratio? 8.15 times in Singapore, in the US 2.7, in the UK 1.5. Now what does that tell you? Singapore is like a heavenly queen, very solid country, a solid stock that has very strong fundamentals, very good government, but it's very expensive. It's like Costco, or it's priced to perfection. At 8.15 times is really something that is more expensive than the rest. And in terms of GDP growth, surprise, UK, despite its Brexit, is still higher than Singapore. Perhaps Singapore is no longer the fast growth country that it is to be. Now, one of the questions that people will say, but Singapore's tax rate is much lower than the US or UK. And our tax ranges between as low as 10 to highest 24%, whereas in UK could be 40. Even if I double the salary, effective salary, so 80,000, our PEG ratio will still be 4 times. It is still almost more than double of UK and about 50% higher than the US. So it's still very expensive, no matter what you say. Basically sums up what I say, that Singapore's GDP growth is surprisingly about only 3.2%. The average house price is very high. The average salary, even if you double it, is still not going to make up for the very expensive situation where the PEG is 8.15, US is 2.7, the UK is 1.85. So how do you access landed properties in Singapore? As you all know, I'm a fund manager, but how I got to be financially free, where I have my options in the first place, was because of properties. I started out investing in Singapore, of course, buy 2 properties, residential properties, and then when the government start to have cooling measures and restrict us to buying multiple properties, then I started to go to the UK to do it. And of course, I do asset progression in Singapore as well. But if you are looking to buy UK properties, look out for us. And you can email Josh Ellicock at eopropertyinvestments.com or click on the link below.